this video, I will review how to fill out the VCAP ranking spreadsheet, also known as the Form 6. It is a required form to be submitted with every VCAP application, and it is an editable Excel spreadsheet that you'll fill out on the computer, and I can show you where to find that now on the VCAP website. You'll go to the main VCAP homepage and scoot on over to the resources for districts. And under the guidance documents list, the last option is for the ranking spreadsheet, and you can click and download that there. So the VCAP steering committee really uses this to compare all of the BMP types and all the applications you receive each month and be able to determine the order that we can allocate funding for and approve projects. It takes into account other variables as well, like pollutant removal efficiency and cost effectiveness, and how the BMP can address the resource concern that a site's experiencing. But the district staffer who's filling this out doesn't need to really worry about too many of those details when they're looking at the spreadsheet. What you really need to focus in on is just filling in these yellow boxes or the yellow areas. That's the only thing you'll have to manipulate and fill out. The ranking sheet will do a lot of work for you. It'll fill in this column in the right-hand corner, or sorry, the right-hand column, and then it'll auto-populate the score for you at the very bottom. So no math required on that end. We do have a minimum score of 65 points that a project must meet. So if you're filling a ranking sheet out and it falls below that, it's not eligible at that time to be reviewed formally by the steering committee. But there are ways that we can help you get that score up if you are willing to be creative and work with your applicant if they're really excited about applying for VCAP. So the first thing we'll look at is this top right-hand corner. It's those yellow boxes here, and I've filled out now, or I've already filled it out for time's sake, but the first box is for the contract number, and every application needs its own unique contract number. Those first two numbers should represent the district number. The second two digits represent the program year or calendar year. It doesn't really matter which one you choose, just be consistent with it. And the final three digits should be just any number as assigned by the district. So a lot will just do 001 for the first application and then go up from there as the year progresses. The second box is the practice type, and that's a drop-down menu. You can choose the BMP that the application is for. For us, we're going to look at a rain garden today as an example as we go through this document. The next two boxes are for the estimated cost or cost share requested. And the estimated cost is really just the total cost. And be sure for this number, it's just the eligible cost. So sometimes applicants will be doing a couple projects on their property at the same time and include that on their design plan. Ensure this number is only the eligible cost for the BMP. For the cost share requested, you can take a look on our website as well. There is a document that has a chart of all the BMP caps for each year, each program year, and you can determine how to figure out the cost share request for each BMP type. For a rain garden, it's going to be 75% of the eligible cost, up to $3,500. So because this project is quite inexpensive, the cost share request is obviously under that cap, and it's going to be just over $1,100. For the resource concern, it's another drop down, and you've got the three options, and those are the three different resource concerns that we look for, and it has to meet at least one of these to be eligible. For this, we're going to choose excess runoff, but if you have questions about determining the resource concern and how to identify that on a site visit, we've got plenty of resources on our website, so take a look. There's a whole page dedicated to it in the new District Guide to VCAP. We've got some charts and guides to help you as well. So now we can jump into the main part of the ranking sheet, and I'll just go over each column briefly so you kind of understand how it works. So this first column, which has the ranking criteria header, basically just outlines what we're going to be looking to award points for in each kind of category. Be sure to read closely because they have instructions about how you should go about figuring out the points for each. So for example, this first one, and it's pretty true for a lot of different categories, it says only select one. So ensure that when you're filling this out, you're only picking one of the categories or one of the options. And also in this category, as you kind of hover over these white boxes, you can see that these comment boxes pop up, and those just give you a better description of what each category is for and kind of what would be eligible to receive points. And this can also be found in the ranking sheet instruction guide on our website. So if it's kind of a lot for you to look at these comment boxes, you can definitely look at the ranking sheet instruction guide. It's got the same exact information in just one long Word document. The second column is for where you input the actual points. And you can see here it says input a 1 for yes or leave 0 for no. So for this first section, all you're going to do is input a 1 in one of the categories that's the most correct, and then leave the others blank. And that's all you have to do. The column to the right of that is the point value. So it just lets you know the maximum point value for each of the 3 options, or each of the options for points. And once you fill out this yellow column, the points earned is going to automatically pop up here on the right. So I'll just go ahead and type in a 1 for this because I know that we've already decided the excess runoff is the resource concern. And you can see that 10 points automatically popped up here on the right. And that's where it's going to auto-populate your final score from. So we can jump right in and go through an example of a rain garden together. So I'm not going to go into details about which resource concern is eligible for each BMP because that's all on our website as well. But for a rain garden today, our resource concern is going to be excess runoff. So all I had to do is put a 1 here and click away, and then I saw the points pop up. For the next option of points, it's for the ownership type. And again, it says only select 1. So pretty straightforward. Who owns the property that the BMP is going to be installed on. And for a lot of the cases, it's going to be a private residence. And I would just put a 1 in that top category and leave it blank. But if it's for a HOA or a school, for example, you would put the number 1 in either of these 2 boxes and leave the rest blank. And they get a little more complicated here, but nothing too confusing. It is whether or not there is a stormwater management facility downstream from the site. So you can receive points if the water from the proposed site currently drains to a ditch or stormway or waterway, et cetera, that is untreated. So I know for this site that the rain garden drains to a storm drain that does not drain to a facility that treats the water. It just drains to a local stream. So I'm going to put a 1 here. You might have to do a little sleuthing to find this out, or maybe talk to the homeowner to see if they might know the answer. But more often than not, it's going to be untreated. The next option of points is for the proximity of stormwater conveyance system or waterway. And you've got 2 options here. And it says only select 1 if applicable. So you could be eligible to get points for either of these if the resource concern where the BMP is going to be installed is within 40 feet or 100 feet of a stormwater conveyance like a ditch, storm drain, or waterway. And it kind of makes sense why these are high points, because we can get really great water quality benefits from projects that are treating runoff right before it gets to a storm drain or a waterway, et cetera. But I would just be sure that you're ranking this accurately, because oftentimes people think that they can receive points for this if the property line is next to a storm drain, or if there's a storm drain down the street that it drains to. The resource concern itself, that where the BMP is going to be installed, has to be within these proximities. So I'm going to put a 1 here because I know that where this rain garden is going to be is within 100 feet of a storm drain. Next option is for slope. And you've got, again, 2 options, and select 1 if applicable. A project can receive points for treating a poorly vegetated or eroding slope. And it has to be considered a critical slope, which we consider to be 15%. And for this first set of points, you can receive 10 points if it is if a BMP, which is probably going to be conservation landscaping in this sense, provides cover to a critical slope. So, for example, a mulch bed is being installed on a eroding critical slope, and then they could receive 10 points for this. And for this one, living shorelines are not eligible, and it's not eligible if the slope is less than 2 feet in height. Alternatively, you can receive 5 points for a BMP that mitigates concentrated runoff to a slope, so above a slope, essentially. So for us, I know that this rain garden is going to be going in at the top of the critical slope, and I'm going to award the 5 points for this one. And as well, this one only applies, opposite to the last one, this one only applies to structural practices, and it has to be within 40 feet of the top of the slope. So be sure you're reading those comment boxes, or just understanding where these points are able to be awarded to when you're filling this out. This next set is seems more confusing than it is. It's whether or not the practice addresses local sediment or nutrient goals, and you kind of have 3 options to be awarded points for this one. One could be for being in a approved TMDL implementation plan for only sediment or nutrient impairments. That one, I think often people get a little confused because there's plenty of bacteria TMDLs out there, but for that one, for being in a bacteria TMDL, you are not eligible to receive points for this, and I'll go through an example of that in a second. You can receive points in this category for being in a MS4 locality, or for a locality that this BMP would be in, having a comprehensive stormwater management plan. And the last two, the MS4 locality or the comprehensive stormwater management plan, we don't really keep lists of that here at the state level with VCAP, so that's something that we would expect the district or local government to know. So if you think that might be the case for a project site, definitely reach out to your local government or do some local research to see if that would be the case. But for the TMDL implementation plan, I can show you how to figure that out right now. I'm going to pull up the DEQ environmental data mapper, and I've already kind of pre-screened the DEQ data layers, so I've got only pulled up what I want to have pulled up, and then that would be the TMDL implementation plan watershed layers and the TMDL watershed layers. So you can see it's color-coded, and we're going to be looking for only the sediment and nutrients TMDL watersheds, and you can see that's the yellow and the orange. You can search by address if you'd like, or zoom in if you know your local map very well. And if you find that it is within a sediment or nutrient TMDL, it is eligible to receive points. And you can also click on each watershed and see what kind of pollutant it's addressing. So for example, this area in Virginia Beach is for phosphorus. So they would be eligible for those points if it's within that area. And I know for this rain garden that we're not in any of those 3 options, so I'm going to leave that blank as a 0. Moving on to the BMP selection section. This first one is for BMP type and select one if applicable. And I know this is a rain garden, so it's considered a structural BMP, and all I have to do is put a 1 in there and click away and get those 10 points. And if you read through the rest, you can determine which, if your BMP is eligible for these points. I will say that a point of confusion, and one that I would like to clarify, is that for conservation landscaping, if it's a mulch bed, a meadow, or a tree planting, you would leave this entire section blank. It wouldn't be eligible for any points under the BMP type section, unless it's a riparian buffer or filter strip. So keep that in mind when you're filling this out. I'm always looking for a conservation landscaping project when I receive the ranking score to check for this, because it's something that is a point of confusion for a lot of folks. The next is if the provided BMP, or sorry, the proposed BMP provides alternative disconnection. So this is if the BMP disconnects and disperses impervious runoff. And I've got some more information from a previous training about that if some of those terminologies are a little bit confusing. But basically a structural BMP is able to receive points if there is no underdrain in it, if it intercepts impervious runoff by being less than 40 feet from a stormwater conveyance, and or discharges to a slope that's greater than 5%. And that's because if those 2 criteria are met, then it's considered connected to the stormwater conveyance system, and alternative disconnection would be very helpful to minimize stormwater impacts. So I know for this one, we're going to go ahead and put a 1 because it's a rain garden. I know that it disconnects impervious runoff and meets those criteria. These next 2 sections are kind of the only 2 where you're going to not be putting a 1 or 0. You're actually going to be inputting actual values. So you're going to have to put in the treatment area, and this is something that you're going to have to do some calculations for to figure out, or if the contractor's involved, you could get that from them. But you're going to go ahead and put in the impervious area treated in square feet, as well as the total contributing drainage area in square feet. So I know the answer to this one. I'm going to go ahead and put in the values. I've got just over 1,900 square feet of rooftop this is going to be treating, and a total drainage area of 3,886 square feet. And that includes the pervious area it's treating. And again, for this one, living shorelines is not eligible, and neither is conservation landscaping unless it's configured as a filter strip with a 35 feet minimum length. The reason for this, I think it's another point of confusion, is just for conservation landscaping, how it's reported to DEQ. It doesn't take into account drainage area at all. We only are able to report the footprint of the practice. So that's why it's not eligible for points in this category. So for a normal conservation landscape project, such as a mulch bed, you just leave these 2 as 0. For the installed area, you're going to only input values in one of these options. And if you want to figure out which you're supposed to use, hover over and it'll let you know the applicable practices. So for example, you would use gallons for dry well and rainwater harvesting. But for the most part, most would be inputting the surface area of the practice in square feet. And that's what we're going to do today for this rain garden. I'm going to put in 180 square feet. And that's the size of the rain garden that we're going to be installing. And these final two, the last 2 points we're going to put in is for partnership and educational value. And these are kind of like bonus points. So if you know that there's going to be some partner agency work with this or educational value that's going to be a part of the efforts, then you can go ahead and consider these 2 points. For partnership, to be eligible for these points, it must be an agency or nonprofit that's involved with the design, installation, and maintenance of the practice. So that's a new criteria. All 3 must be met to receive these points. And some examples could be master gardeners or other nonprofits that are going to be working on those aspects. And it does not include MOUs or MOAs that have a paid partnership with a district or permanent agencies that are always involved, such as Cs or VIMs with Living Shorelines BMPs. And if you've got a partner that they're working with, please put that in the notes column. And we also would love to see it in the application as well, just to kind of get more of a narrative of it. And the educational value, this would be eligible for points if the practice has some kind of educational aspect to it, where they plan to have a educational program with students or could be adults after it's installed. And this as well needs to be publicly accessible. And that could be from roads, trails, water, or public facilities. So we always love to see these 2 things, but again, we do have some additional criteria from this program year that we look for in order to receive those points. And for today's example, I'm going to go ahead and leave this blank just because it's not a part of this application. And that's all. That's the end of the ranking sheet. You can take a look at these extra calculations that it kind of does for you. Look at the cost per impervious area treated or the cost per installed area. Those all are calculated on their own, as well as some other pollutant removal values. And we've got our total ranking score comes out at 102.8, which is quite good. That is a strong project. And for example, say you fill out this form and you find that it's only 64 points, for example. You can go and take a look and play with the numbers a little bit and see if you could drive down the total cost or increase the square footage of the practice, if you might be able to bump up that score to meet the minimum ranking score. Districts are able to implement their own policies if they want to be more stringent than the minimum 65-point requirement. That's, of course, something a district can implement themselves. And as long as it still meets our minimum standards, it can always be more strict if that's what you like. And I really encourage you to fill out this form early on in the process, kind of like I was just explaining. If you've got general cost estimates or general project size, it might be helpful for you to get a general idea if it's going to rank out and how much effort and energy you're able to put into it if you think it is not going to meet our minimum score. And also just keep in mind that just because a project does meet the minimum ranking score, it'll still undergo a thorough review by the steering committee. We'll take a look at the design specifications and other application components. So by meeting our minimum score, it's not an automatic green light for project approval, but it's an important aspect, one that we really strongly consider when we do look at approvals each month at the steering committee. So that's all for the ranking sheet. Of course, reach out to me, Maura Christian, if you have any questions. And we've got plenty of other resources on our websites, previous trainings, so definitely take a look at those. Thank you.